Hey internet people, I went ahead and I got the new ignition parts onto the KZ back there behind me, and as soon as I hooked up the fuel I got some leakage through the pods on carb 1 and 2, so we've got some floats that need to be addressed. We'll go ahead, take off the bowls and take a look at those floats. Let's see what we need to do to tweak them so we no longer get leakage. I'm going to use my impact here only to remove the bolts because it's not good to impact them on, but it takes forever to take them off. Take them off nice and easy like this. I'm gonna pop these off here. Alright. So if you don't know, the float, which is this guy here, is what regulates the amount of fuel you have in your bowl, which is the amount of fuel readily available to the carburetor to suck up into the motor. If you have too much fuel, you're going to give it too much fuel and it's going to flood out. If you don't have enough fuel, it's going to basically run dry, and that's no good either. So the height of the float is very important. And what was happening is the floats were getting stuck like this, which leaves it open and all the fuel will just go in and it will flood it out and eventually comes dripping out the carburetor. That's no good. Right now you can see these are actually pretty floppy, but it's not that hard for everything to get stuck open. So we're gonna have to pop out these pins and pull the floats off. We're gonna inspect the sides of the float here, make sure there's no burrs or anything like that that would cause it to stick. It should move freely. Make sure there's no burrs on the pin itself, and we're also going to pull out the fuel valves. I don't know what they're called. The valves. We'll call them valves. Okay. Nice little screwdriver here. We want to carefully pop these pins out. Let's make sure we don't lose the order of which carburetor the things go to. Pull off the float here. We also want to inspect the float. Make sure that the float itself is good. These things can dry out over time, and what will happen is the fuel will actually soak into them, and that will cause them to constantly be open. Changes the weight and the buoyancy of them. Let's see if we can get this guy out of here. This guy wants to be stubborn. It's okay. Little tappy tap won't hurt. Pull that guy out. This float off. Okay. Let's go ahead. Pull these out. And this right here, you can see I've got a little bit of an issue with the O-ring. I don't know if that's going to actually cause a problem or not. We'll clean it up and put it back in there. But you've got this little valve here that is on a spring, and it seats right into there. What happens when your float is down, it opens like that, lets the fuel through. When your float goes up, it pushes on it and closes that circuit so you don't get any more fuel coming in. But this all looks to be pretty free moving. I don't see any major issues on the point there or anything in there that's causing problems, so that looks pretty good. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull off that little bit of the O-ring. It doesn't actually look like it's going to impact the performance on it. Let's go ahead and replace that guy and put the seat back on with a retention clip. I also don't know what that's called. Pull this off. Just visually inspect this one in the same manner. Ooh. This one's a little bit harder to come out. Ugh. That's okay, that means it's sealed real good. Use some needle nose to gently grasp it. Wiggle it. Wiggle. Just like a tooth. Wiggle, wiggle. And pop. Okay. Let's not lose parts here. Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay. The ring on this one looks pretty good too. No weird wear in here. It's a little bit more wear on the tip on this one, but nothing abnormal. Our springiness still is pretty good. I'd say that guy's okay. Push back in. Okay. Now the proper way to test if your floats are cracked and bad is to simply put them in some mineral oil or something else that's not going to cause it to rust or flash off or anything like that. And just let it sit and soak and see if they sink. If they stay floating, you're good. I'm not going to test that today. I'm fairly confident these floats are still good. Sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to check the edges here for any sort of marring or anything like that that would cause it to stick on the posts. The posts themselves, those feel pretty smooth on both sides, which is good because I really don't want to file right above the carbs. Have to worry about cleaning out filing stuff there. So just take another quick look at these. They don't look too bad. I mean, you can see a little bit. You can kind of feel they're a little rough. So we're gonna hit that just a little bit. I have a feeling it's the same on this one. Yeah, you can't feel it, but I can feel it's catching a little bit on the inside there. So we're just gonna clean those up just a little bit. Okay. I've got some extra 600 grit that was just laying around. And we're just gonna come through. Just knock the edge off. We're not going for a polish smooth or anything like that. We just want to get that edge knocked off so it doesn't have the opportunity to catch. Shouldn't take much. There wasn't much wrong here to deal with anyway. Just want to make sure it's good. Feels fine. And by feel, I mean I can feel it with the sandpaper. I know I didn't do that, but that's not going to hit the glove. but you can tell the change in resistance of the sandpaper. Also the look of it. You can see that it's starting to round over with a little bit of shine to it. That's all we're looking for. This side, not so round, not so shiny. Just want to make it a little bit rounder, a little bit shinier. Okay, that should be good. Alright. Let's go ahead, put these guys back on here. Actually, you know what? We didn't inspect the pins yet. These could probably use a little bit of polishing on them. Not a lot. Just enough. Just to get off any sort of surface imperfections, you know? Still a little bit up there I want to get. Oop, oop, oop. Careful when you put it in. You got to get it under the stop there. Oop. Pop this guy in. I didn't follow my own advice again. There we go, under the stop. Okay. You'll notice still not quite flush. We just need to do tiny taps to get it flush up in there. Tiny taps. There we go. Well, that should be good. They feel pretty floppy, but you know what? They didn't feel too bad before either. Alright, now we want to double check the height of our floats. See, in our manual here for the KZ1100A, our float height should be 18.6 millimeters. Now if we look here, this tells us, oh look, 18.6. I guess it doesn't change per model. Anyway, this is how you measure your float height. What we do is we come from the face of the carburetor and measure up to the top of the float there. We don't measure to the top of that. We don't measure anywhere else. We just measure to the top of there. And you'll see there's a couple things that are in our way. We've got our gasket here and then the lip. We don't measure from the lip and we don't measure with the gasket. So we're going to have to gently take this gasket off. That way we can reuse it, because I don't feel like buying new carburetor gaskets. You'll see these are already not in perfect condition, but you know what? They still seal, for the most part. Maybe if I rebuild these carbs again, I'll get new gaskets. For now, it's fine. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to measure from here. There's a tiny little not indent, I guess it's a raised track that helps seal out that gasket. We don't want to measure that either. So we're going to take our digital calipers here. We are simply going to drop our caliper next to that groove and drop down to that float. You will see this side is actually a little high at 18.97. Where's this side at? This side is even higher at about 19.2. And by high, that actually means low. The floats are sitting lower than they should be, which means it's going to keep trying to, it's not going to have enough fuel in it. So we need to bend this just a tiny little bit to bring these down. So this right here is what adjusts the height. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too big of a tweak there. 18.6, look at that. This side is also right about 18.6. Cool. Drop this gasket back on here. Yeah, they're nice and good. Let's put our bowl back on. And hand tighten these screws. Okay. This one's a little high too. Let's do some bendy. 18.3 and 18.8. I think the difference, if I get it tweaked just right, should put us right at 18.6. 18.4, like 18.4. So they're both at like 18.4. A little too much, so give it a little pop back down, just a little bit. I think that might have gone too much. Let's see. Yeah. Well, actually that's perfect. 18.6. Okay, good enough. There is a tolerance of like plus or minus 2 millimeters, I think. So, good enough. Get our gasket on. Pop the bowl back on. All right, let's put them back on and see where we're at. I've learned the easiest way to put these carbs in is to get this throttle cable hooked up first. And then one hand, pass it underneath to the other hand. And then just kind of set them in the opening. That way you can get your vacuum hose hooked up and the fuel line hooked up somehow. You can find them. Got the fuel and vacuum hooked up. Now we just tilt these, both these up in there. Go. Get our clamps back up here. They don't really need to be like manly tight, because manly anything is a little extreme. They need to be tight enough to keep them from falling off. They should seal that air gap themselves pretty good. If you need to clamp them on super tight, clean the mating surface off your carb, check your boots, make sure they're not cracked. If they are, just replace them. It's easier. You don't want to have to chase vacuum leaks forever. These clamps are the original ones. They still work pretty good. Okay, so now we got to fill these with some fuel. This is a vacuum petcock, so it does not open until there's vacuum from the engine. However, this is a prime setting. Flipping into this will bypass the vacuum system and allow fuel to flow. So right now, there should be fuel not in the tank because I totally forgot to fill it up. Let's do that real quick. I had emptied it out because the gas that was sitting in there was pretty old. So let's go ahead and get some new stuff in there, because can't fill the carbs with gas from the tank if there's no gas in the tank. This is a nice big tank. A lot of the cafe racer people don't like these big tanks just because they're big and heavy, but honestly, I like the extra gas capacity much more than the little bit of weight saving from not having such a big tank. Also gives me something to grab my legs onto while I'm, you know, taking corners a little bit harder than I probably should. I do not see anything coming out of the carbs. Well, let's try and fire it up. Got a choke on. Whoop. That doesn't sound like I'm spinning. Rather, the starter spinning and not the motor. Well, it looks like we're not going to be finishing this today. Ended up pulling the starter apart, and yeah, it looks like it fried itself. So I'm gonna have to fix the starter and probably replace the starter clutch parts too. Good times.